My name is Colin. I'm 63 years old. 18 months ago, I was sitting in a one-bedroom flat in Coventry, England, watching the electric meter tick down and eating beans on toast for the fourth night that week because my universal credit had been sanctioned again. I'd applied for 472 jobs in 14 months. I'd had 11 interviews. I'd been offered zero. Today I'm sitting on a balcony in Chiang Mai, Thailand. My rent is $300 a month. I have money in the bank for the first time in 6 years. Let me tell you how that happened. I grew up in a mining village outside Nottingham. My dad worked at Gatling Colliery for 29 years until it shut in 1991. My mom worked at the primary school as a dinner lady. I was the middle of three. We had chips on Fridays and a Sunday roast if the week had been kind to us, and if it hadn't, we had toast and eggs, and my mom saying, "That'll do us fine." I left school at 16. I did an apprenticeship at a small engineering firm in Nottingham that made valves for industrial pumps. I stayed at that firm for 11 years. Then I moved to a bigger company in Derby and stayed there for 19 years. Then that closed in 2011, and I moved to a company in Coventry that made specialized fittings for the automotive supply chain, and I stayed there for another 11 years. I married Susan in 1985 at a registry office in Nottingham. She worked as a receptionist at a dental surgery. We had a son, Michael, in 1988, and a daughter, Rachel, in 1991. We bought a small terraced house in a suburb of Coventry in 1994 for £42,000. We paid the mortgage off in 2019, one of the proudest days of my life. And Susan opened a bottle of Prosecco and we sat in the back garden drinking it out of tea mugs because we couldn't be bothered to find the good glasses. Susan died in the second wave of COVID in January of 2021. She was 58. She'd gone into hospital with what we thought was a chest infection. She never came home. I could not visit her. Nobody could. I want to skip past that because there is no useful telling of it. She was there and then she was gone and it took 4 days. I stayed at the Coventry firm for another year. I did my job. I ate ready meals. I sat in the front room in the evening with the telly on, and I did not really watch it. Rachel called me every Sunday. Michael texted me every couple of weeks. I told them both I was fine. I was not fine, but I was functional, and I thought functional was the same thing. Then, in August of 2022, the firm went under. Not because of us on the floor. Some contract with a German manufacturer fell through. Then the energy prices doubled, and by the time the receivers came in, it was over in about 6 weeks. I was 61 years old. I'd been an engineer of one sort or another for 45 years. I was made redundant with a small statutory payout, about £7,000 after tax. I told myself I'd have another job in 3 months. I was wrong. I want to be honest with you about what the UK job market is like for a man in his 60s in an industrial trade. It is brutal. I do not use that word for effect. It is brutal. The manufacturing base I'd worked in for 45 years had been hollowing out for 2 decades, and COVID finished off what Brexit had wounded. The firms that were left were either automating, offshoring, or looking specifically for people under 35 that they could pay less. My CV, which I updated at the Coventry Central Library because I couldn't afford broadband at home anymore, listed 45 years of hands-on engineering experience. I was told in polite emails from HR departments that I was overqualified. I was told I was not the right cultural fit. I was told the role had been filled internally. I was told twice that I should consider retraining as an IT technician. which is a suggestion made by people who have never opened up a hydraulic pump in their lives. I applied for 472 jobs between September of 2022 and November of 2023. I kept a spreadsheet. Rachel had shown me how to use Google Sheets on her laptop the Christmas before her mom died. Every application, every date, every response or non-response, I logged it. 472 applications, 11 interviews, 0 offers. I signed on for Universal Credit in October of 2022. If you're not British, I will explain. Universal Credit is the UK's main working age benefit. For a single man over 25 with no children in the household, it pays around £393 a month, which was about $480 at the time. It is meant to be topped up by a housing element for rent, which for me was another £420, roughly $510. I sat in the job centre on Bishop Street in Coventry once a fortnight for over a year. My work coach was a young woman named Amber who could not have been more than 24. She was decent. She was not cruel, but she had a checklist she had to run through, and I had to prove I'd applied for enough jobs each week or my payments would be sanctioned. Sanctioned means stopped for a period, sometimes weeks, sometimes months, if you're deemed not to have complied. I was sanctioned twice. Once for missing an appointment because the bus was cancelled. Once because I hadn't logged enough applications in a single week, because I'd been ill for 4 days with something that felt like the flu, and I couldn't face the library computers. I want to walk you through what a month actually cost me in Coventry, because the numbers matter. They are the whole story of why I'm sitting on a balcony in Thailand right now, instead of a bus stop in the Midlands. Rent on my one-bedroom flat, which I had moved into after selling the terraced house in early 2022 because I couldn't face living in it without Susan. £680 a month. Universal Credit covered 420 of it. I paid the other 260 out of the standard allowance. Council tax £120 a month with a single person discount. Gas and electric, which is the one that broke a lot of us in 2022 and 2023. My combined bill in the winter of 2022 ran £240 a month, and I kept the heat off in every room except the front room in the evenings. In summer, it dropped to about 90. Broadband and phone, £45 a month for the cheapest package I could find, which I got specifically so I could apply for jobs from home instead of at the library. Food. I budgeted £40 a week at Lidl and Aldi. I hit that budget most weeks. Some weeks I didn't. Some weeks I ate a lot of tinned tomatoes on toast. TV license, £13 a month. Yes, in the UK, you have to pay for a license to legally watch television. I paid it. Susan had always paid it, and I kept paying it after she died because it felt like something she would have wanted done properly. Water rates, £32 a month. Bus pass because I couldn't afford to run a car anymore. I sold the Ford Focus in December of 2022 for £1,100. Bus pass, £60 a month for the concessionary rate I qualified for at 61. That comes to about £1,700 a month in the winter, more like £1,500 in the summer. My Universal Credit total, standard allowance plus housing element, was about £813. I was drawing down my redundancy money by £700 a month to survive. By November of 2023, the redundancy money was gone. Completely gone. 14 months of it, or £7,000, eaten by the gap between what the state paid me and what it actually cost to be alive in Coventry. I sat in that flat one Wednesday night in November of 2023. The heating was off. It was 6 degrees outside and about 11 degrees in my living room. I was wearing a fleece and a wool hat indoors, which is a specific kind of humiliation I had never expected to feel at 62 years old. I opened my banking app on the cheap Android phone I'd bought secondhand from CEX for £40, and I looked at my account balance. £218. That was everything I had in the world. My state pension was still 3 years away. My private pension, which I'd built up over 45 years of work, was tied up in 3 different pots from 3 different employers, and after doing the maths with a free advisor from Citizens Advice, I was going to be looking at roughly £900 a month combined when I hit 66. In Coventry in 2027, £900 a month was going to be a slow disaster. I sat there in that fleece and that wool hat, and I looked at my banking app, and I did something I hadn't done in the 14 months since I'd started applying for jobs. I gave up. I mean that clearly. I gave up on the job hunt. I closed the spreadsheet. I did not open another job listing. I sat back in the chair and I said out loud to an empty flat, "This isn't going to work. This country isn't going to work for me. I have to think of something else." I sat in that flat for another 2 hours. That Wednesday night, I made a cup of tea. I sat in the front room in the dark because I didn't want to turn a lamp on. I thought about my options. I could move in with Rachel. She lived in a 2-up, 2-down in Leicester with her partner James and their little girl Poppy, who was 4. She had offered twice. She meant it. But the box room was Poppy's, and James was decent but stretched thin, and I was not going to be the father-in-law on the sofa at 63 years old with no job and no money. My mother would have crawled out of her grave and belted me across the ear. That was not going to happen. I could move to Nottingham and live near my brother Trevor. Trevor was 2 years older and doing all right on his railway pension. But Trevor and I had never been close, and I was not going to force a new closeness at 63 out of financial desperation. That would poison what little we did have. I could apply for sheltered housing. I could go on the council list. The waiting list in Coventry for a decent 1-bedroom in sheltered accommodation was, and this is the truth, 4 to 6 years. I did not have 4 to 6 years of £200 bank balances in me. I could keep applying for jobs, but I had just decided I couldn't. I sat there in the dark with my tea going cold in my hands, and I did something I had not done in months. I picked up the cheap Android phone and I opened YouTube. Rachel had shown me how to use it the Christmas before. I had watched maybe a dozen videos on it in 18 months, mostly clips of old football matches, Notts County goals from the 80s when my dad and I used to go to Meadow Lane on a Saturday. I typed into the search bar something I had never typed before. I typed cheap places to retire abroad on UK pension. I do not know what I was looking for. I do not think I was really looking for anything. I think I was looking for permission to keep sitting there and not do anything, which is what I would have found if the algorithm had gone another way. The first video was a British couple, both mid-60s, filmed in a small kitchen. Behind them was a window, and behind the window was a swimming pool. The wife was explaining that they lived in a town called Cha Am in Thailand. They rented a 2-bedroom bungalow for 18,000 baht a month. She converted it for the camera, £410 a month, for a 2-bedroom bungalow with a shared pool. I paused the video. I put the phone face down on the arm of the chair. I sat there in the dark. My rent in Coventry was £680 a month for a one-bedroom flat with damp on the bathroom ceiling. I picked the phone back up. I watched the rest of the video. Then I watched another one. Then another. I sat in the front room in that fleece and wool hat and I watched videos on a cheap Android phone until 3 in the morning. There was a man from Manchester in Chiang Mai, 68, widower, living on his state pension plus a small private pension. Total income about £1,200 a month. Rent 7,500 baht a month, about £170. He was saving £350 a month. Saving. On a state pension. There was a couple from Wales in a place called Hua Hin. He had been a mechanic. She had been a nurse. Both retired at 62. They ran through their monthly budget on camera in detail. Everything included, they were spending £1,400 a month between the two of them. There was a woman from Newcastle in Chiang Mai, 61, divorced. She had moved after being made redundant from a call center. Her breakdown of cost was so detailed, she had put it in a graphic on the screen. Rent, 7,000 baht. Electric, 1,500. Food and eating out, 6,000. Everything else, 3,000. Total, 17,500 baht. £400 a month. She was 61 years old and living better on £400 a month in Thailand than she had been in Newcastle on 900. I went to bed at almost 4. I could not sleep. I lay there in the dark with the wool hat still on because the flat had cooled down to about 9 degrees by then. And I thought about the job center. I thought about Amber and her checklist. I thought about the 472 applications. I thought about Susan and what she would have said. I thought about the pound coins I had stopped picking up off the ground years ago. And how, if I moved to Thailand and could live on 400 a month, my 3 pensions when they finally kicked in at 66 would let me save 400 a month for the rest of my life. I thought about the fact that I was 63 and I had never once considered that living outside the UK was a thing I was allowed to do. I got up at 7. I made coffee, proper coffee from the tin Rachel had bought me for my birthday. I sat at the little table by the window and I opened the phone and I started making notes. I did not have a laptop anymore. I had sold the old one to CEX in April for £80. I made notes with my thumbs on the Notes app. I gave myself a week. I told myself I would spend 1 week researching this seriously. Then I would decide. I want to walk you through what that week looked like because it is the piece of my story that made everything else possible. Day 1. I went to the library on the bus. I spent 6 hours on their computer, which was free, and I did nothing but read. I read expat forums. I read articles on cost of living. I found a website called Numbeo, and I looked at Chiang Mai, Hua Hin, Cha Am, Chiang Rai, Kanchanaburi. I made a spreadsheet on Google Sheets on my phone that evening at home. Every place, every category, every rough monthly cost converted into pounds. Day 2. I went back to the library. I read about visas. Thailand has a retirement visa called the non-immigrant OA. Age 50 and over. You need to prove either 800,000 baht in a Thai bank, about 18,000 pounds, or a monthly income of 65,000 baht, about 1,480 pounds, or a combination. I did not have 18,000 pounds. I did not have 1,480 pounds a month yet either. I sat in the library staring at my screen and I thought, well, that's that then. But I kept reading. I found something called the non-immigrant O visa, which is easier to qualify for and can be converted into a retirement extension once you're in Thailand and once your state pension kicks in. There were also 6-month tourist visas you could get from the Thai embassy in London that would let you stay for months at a stretch while you sorted things out. There were paths for people with less money than the guidance implied. Not easy paths, but paths. Day 3. I looked up flights. Manchester to Bangkok one way in February of 2024, 4 months out from where I was sitting. £342 on a Turkish Airlines flight with a layover in Istanbul. £342. That was less than my winter gas bill. Day 4. I called Rachel. I told her the whole thing, what I had been researching, the numbers, the videos. I told her I was thinking about going, not visiting, going, moving. Rachel was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Dad." I said, "Rachel." She said, "Dad, you're serious?" I said, "I think I might be." She said, "Dad, what about Poppy? She's going to be 5 next year. She won't remember you if you're on the other side of the world." That one hit me hard. I want to be honest about that. I sat there on the phone and I did not know what to say for about 20 seconds. Then I said, "Rachel, sweetheart, listen to me. If I stay here in this flat on universal credit with 200 quid in the bank, Poppy is going to know a granddad who's sad and broken and can't afford to buy her a birthday present. If I go to Thailand and I make this work, Poppy is going to know a granddad who saved up and flew her out to see elephants when she's 8. Which one is better?" Rachel was quiet. Then she said, "Dad, are you telling me you're skiing right now?" I said, "Yes, love, I'm skiing right now." She said, "Why didn't you tell me?" I said, "Because you have your own life and I am your father. I am not going to be a burden on you." She was crying. I could hear her trying not to let me hear. She said, "Dad, can I send you some money?" I said, "Rachel, no." She said, "Dad, please, let me help." I said, "Rachel, I love you. I am not taking your money. What I am asking you is different. I am asking you to help me look at this properly, to help me think about whether this Thailand thing is a real option or a stupid dream. Will you do that with me?" She was quiet again. Then she said, "Yes, yes, I will. Let me talk to James. Give me a couple of days." She rang me back on the Saturday. She had spent the whole week reading everything I had sent her. She had watched the same videos. She had gone through my spreadsheet. She had talked to James and to her mother-in-law, who used to be an accountant. She had a list of questions. She said, "Dad, I have 4 things to say to you. Are you sitting down?" I said, "I've been sitting down for 14 months, love." She laughed. Small laugh, but a laugh. She hadn't laughed at anything I'd said in a very long time. She said, "First, the maths works. I've checked. The maths works. If you can get yourself there, you can live on your universal credit alone until your pensions kick in. And once the pensions kick in, you'll be saving hundreds of quid a month." She said, "Second, you cannot get universal credit while living abroad. That stops the second you leave the country. So you have to have enough saved to get you to your state pension at 66, which is 3 years and 1 month away for you. You've done the maths on that, right?" I had. Rent at £300 a month, food at another 200, everything else at another 200. £700 a month for 3 years and 1 month. That was £26,000. I had 218. I said, "Rachel, I've done the maths." I don't have £26,000, she said. Third, James's mom reckons you should look into equity release. I said, Rachel, I don't have a house anymore. I sold it in 2022. She was quiet. Then she said, Dad, that was the last thing on my list. I forgot. Sorry. She said, Fourth, I have £3,000 in a savings account. James has agreed. It's yours, not a loan, a gift. And James's mom is offering to lend you $5,000 more at zero interest to be paid back when your state pension kicks in. She was very clear. Zero interest. She said, and I'm quoting her here, tell your dad I know what a job center is like. My brother lived through it in the 80s. Tell him this is what family is for. I sat in that cold flat with the phone against my ear and I did not know what to say. I said, Rachel, I can't. She said, Dad, you can. You will. Because if you stay in that flat one more winter, you're going to break. I can hear it in your voice already. We are not letting that happen. Do you understand me? I understood her. Rachel and James's mom wired me the money on the following Tuesday. £8,000 into an account I had opened at Monza specifically so I could manage everything from my phone once I left the country. I sat in that flat and I looked at the balance on the app and I did not feel triumphant. I felt something closer to shame. A 63-year-old man taking £8,000 from his daughter and a woman he had met 3 times at Christmas. But under the shame was something else. Under the shame was the first solid ground I had stood on in 14 months. I want to be honest about the guilt. It sat on me for weeks. I would wake up at 4 in the morning in that cold flat and I would think, you are a grown man taking money from a young family. I would go through the day and I would push it down. Then I would wake up at 4 the next morning and it would be there again. I called Rachel about it on the Thursday. I said, Love, I feel terrible about this money. She said, Dad, are you spending it wisely? I said, every single pound. She said, then stop feeling terrible. Feel terrible when you waste it, not when you use it. Susan would want you to use it, so do it. I did not know how she had learned to talk like her mother. Susan had always been the one who could say something in one sentence that took the weight off. Rachel had it too, apparently. I had not noticed. I spent the next 12 weeks getting ready. I want to walk you through it because if you are sitting somewhere thinking this is beyond you, I need you to see how ordinary the steps actually are. Week 1. I applied for a new passport. My old one had expired in 2019 and Susan and I had never bothered to renew because we had not been abroad in 6 years by then. The new passport cost me £88 and took 4 weeks. I paid for the fast-track service because I had a plane to catch. Week 2. I made an appointment at the Thai embassy in London for a single-entry tourist visa. 90-day visa, extendable in-country by 30 more days. I planned to use that time to sort out a longer stay once I was on the ground. The visa cost me £25. The train from Coventry to London and back to make the appointment cost me £42 off peak. I stayed the night with my brother Trevor in Nottingham on the way back to save the second train fare. Trevor did not know why I was going to London. I told him I was seeing an old friend. He did not ask questions. He never does. He made me a bacon sandwich and gave me the sofa and drove me to the station in the morning. Trevor is not a man of many words, but he is a man of bacon sandwiches when they are needed, and I am grateful for it. Week 3. I sold everything I owned that was worth selling. I want to describe this specifically because I know Some of you have not done it, and it feels enormous when you start. I put the small 3-piece suite on Facebook Marketplace for £200. A young couple with a baby collected it in a hired van. They gave me £200 in cash, and the woman hugged me at the door and said, "Thank you. It's for the baby's playroom. We couldn't have afforded a new one." I stood at the front door of that flat and I watched them drive away, and I thought Susan would have liked her. I sold the dining table and 4 chairs for £80. I sold the bed for 60. I sold Susan's china cabinet, which was the only piece of real furniture we ever bought new together, for £240 to an antiques dealer who came round with a tape measure and did not haggle when I said the price. I sold my tools, which was the hardest of all of it. 45 years of ratchets and spanners and torque wrenches, all going into the back of a van driven by a man who ran a garage in Nuneaton. £400 for the lot. He said, "You could get more if you sold them individually on eBay." I said, "I know, I don't have time, just take them." He gave me an extra 50 in cash at the door and said, "For your trouble." I did not argue with him. I sold my books at a car boot sale in Meriden the first Saturday of December. £230. I sold Susan's clothes to a charity shop that gave me a receipt for the donation and told me a family in Ukraine would probably wear them by January. That one broke me a little. I stood outside that charity shop on Corporation Street and I put my forehead against the window for a minute, and then I walked to the bus stop. Everything I sold and everything I made from selling it went into the Monzo account. By the end of week 3, I had added another £1,980 to the 8,000 from Rachel and James's mum. I had just under £10,000, not the 26,000 I had calculated I needed, not close to it, but enough to get me on the plane and enough to keep me in Thailand for at least a year while I figured out the rest. Week 4, I gave notice on the flat. My landlord was a middle-aged woman named Denise who owned 3 properties in the area. I called her and I said, "Denise, I'm giving you a month's notice. I'm moving abroad." She was quiet. Then she said, "Colin, are you sure this is a good idea?" I said, "Denise, I am 63 years old and I have run the numbers and I am going to Thailand. Yes, I am sure." She said, "Good luck to you, love." I paid the last month's rent out of the Monzo account and made a note in a little book that Rachel had given me to track everything. Week 5. I made a plan for what to pack. I had 2 suitcases and 1 carry-on. That was it. I made a list. 2 pairs of trousers, 5 shirts, 10 pairs of socks and pants, a jumper for the plane, 1 pair of shoes on my feet and 1 pair of trainers in the suitcase, a wash bag, my medications for 6 months, which the GP was willing to prescribe in advance if I explained the situation, which I did. A small folder of documents, my passport, my visa, my UK bank cards, my new Monzo card, printouts of my pension statements, printouts of the videos I had watched with names and channels and cities in case I needed a starting point once I landed. That was almost everything. I put photos of Susan and the kids and Poppy in the folder as well. I put my dad's watch in the folder. I put my mom's rosary in the folder, even though I have not been to a church since Susan's funeral. Week 6 through 11. I made contact with 3 expats in Chiang Mai through a Facebook group called Chiang Mai Expats. I wanted to be honest about this. 2 of the 3 were friendly but distant. The third was different. His name was Derek. He was from Rotherham. He was 67 and had been in Chiang Mai for 11 years. His first message to me was, "Colin, mate, when you land, message me. I'll pick you up at the airport." No charge. I've been where you are. Somebody did it for me in 2013. I stared at that message for a long time on the phone. A man I had never met in a country I had never been to was offering to pick me up from the airport for free. I messaged him back. I said, Derek, are you sure? I don't want to impose. He wrote back, Colin, in Thailand, you will find there is a lot of impose and a lot of not impose. You'll learn the difference. But this is not impose. This is what we do for each other out here. Message me your flight number when you have it. I messaged him my flight number 2 days later. He wrote back within an hour. I'll be there. Look for the tall Yorkshireman with a grey beard. I'll have a sign. Week 12. I said goodbye to Rachel. I took the bus to Leicester on the second Sunday in February. Poppy was 5 by then. She had a dress on and she wanted to show me a dance she had learned at nursery. James made a Sunday roast. He is a decent cook, better than I am. And he made a proper Yorkshire pudding that would have made my mother proud. After dinner, Rachel and I went into the little garden at the back of the house. It was cold and grey, the way English gardens are in February. She stood there with her arms folded across her chest and she looked at me. She said, Dad, are you scared? I said, every minute of every day. She said, but you're going. I said, I'm going. She said, I need you to promise me something. I said, anything, love. She said, you call me every Sunday. I do not care what time zone you are in. You call me every Sunday. And Dad, if it does not work over there, if you get out there and you are miserable, you tell me. You do not tough it out because you're proud. You tell me and we will figure something out. Do you understand? I said, I understand. She hugged me for a long time in that cold garden. When she pulled back, her eyes were wet. She said, Dad, Mom would have loved this. She always said we should have traveled more. She always said, do you remember? I did remember. Susan had said it 100 times. Somewhere warm. Somewhere warm. Every winter as she pulled her cardigan tighter around her at the kitchen table. Somewhere warm. Rachel said, you're going somewhere warm for both of you. I could not talk. I nodded. She walked me to the bus stop. Poppy came with us wearing wellies over her tights and a pink coat. She held my hand the whole way. At the bus stop, she looked up at me and she said, Granddad, when you go to Thailand, will there be tigers? I said, there used to be, Poppet, not so many now. She said, if you find one, will you send me a picture? I said, I promise. I will send you a picture of every animal I see. She said, okay, Granddad. The bus came. I got on. I sat in a window seat and I waved. Poppy waved, Rachel waved. The bus pulled away and I watched them get smaller and I thought, well, here we go then. I flew out of Manchester on the 21st of February 2024. Turkish Airlines, Manchester to Istanbul. 6-hour layover in Istanbul, where I ate a doner kebab for the equivalent of £4 and drank a Turkish coffee and watched people walking through the airport. And I felt for the first time in a very long time that the world was bigger than the front room of a flat in Coventry. Then Istanbul to Bangkok. 9 hours. I could not sleep. I watched 2 films back to back and I ate everything they gave me and I stared out the window at the dog and I thought about Susan. Then Bangkok to Chiang Mai. 1 hour, 10 minutes. I landed at Chiang Mai International Airport at 9:40 in the evening on the 22nd of February. I walked off the plane into a warm, humid corridor and I walked through immigration where the officer stamped my passport and smiled and said, Welcome to Thailand, sir. and I walked out into the arrivals hall. Derek was standing there, tall Yorkshireman, grey beard. He was holding a small sign that said, "Colin from Coventry." He saw me and his whole face broke into a grin and he said, "There he is, there's our man." I walked over and he shook my hand and he did not let go for a second longer than a normal handshake. He said, "Welcome to Thailand, mate. You made it. You bloody made it." I said, "I made it." He took one of my suitcases and walked me out to a small silver Toyota Vios in the car park. Warm night air, crickets, a big golden Buddha statue lit up above the terminal building. He put my suitcase in the boot. He opened the passenger door for me and he said, "Get in, Colin. Let's get you home." Derek drove me through the warm Thai night. The road from the airport into the city is short, maybe 15 minutes, and the whole way he talked. Not at me, to me. He asked about the flight. He asked about Rachel. He asked what I had eaten in Istanbul. He told me the guest house he had booked me into for the first 2 weeks was 3 streets from his own place in a neighborhood called Santitham. He told me his wife Malay had made a pot of chicken soup and it was waiting on his kitchen table and I was going to eat it before I went to bed, whether I was hungry or not. I said, "Derek, you do not have to feed me." He said, "Colin, I am not asking. Malay has cooked. You will eat. This is not England. When somebody cooks for you here, you eat." We pulled up outside a small 2-story house on a quiet lane. A porch light was on. A woman in her 50s came to the door as we got out of the car. Small, cheerful, her hair pulled back. She waved to me, hands together at her chin, and she said in careful English, "Welcome, Uncle Colin. You're tired. Come, eat first, then rest." I ate her soup at the kitchen table. Chicken, ginger, lemongrass, a soft egg, rice on the side. It cost her maybe 50 baht to make, and it was one of the best things I have ever put in my mouth. I ate 2 bowls. Malay refilled the second one without asking. Derek grinned at me across the table and said, "Told you, you would eat." Derek walked me to the guest house at 11, 2 minutes down the lane. Small tiled room, ceiling fan, a hard bed, a window that opened onto a courtyard where a dog was sleeping. 420 baht a night, about 10 pounds. He handed me the key. He said, "Colin, sleep. Tomorrow we start. Auntie Knock's cart at 8. Rice soup. Then we go apartment hunting." I lay in that bed at midnight with the ceiling fan turning above me, and I could not believe I was in the country. I could not believe I had done it. 12 weeks earlier, I had been in a fleece and a wool hat in a Coventry front room with 218 pounds to my name. Now I was in Thailand. Auntie Knock fed me rice soup at 8, 40 baht, just over 1 pound. She looked me up and down, and she said, "Uncle, you're skinny. You eat." I said, "Yes, ma'am." She said, "Every day. You come, I make you fat." Derek walked me to 3 apartments that morning, all in Santitham, all within a 10-minute walk of his and Molly's house. He had chosen them on purpose. He said, "Colin, do not live in Niman. Niman is where the young ones go, loud, expensive. Santitham is where you actually live. You're near a market, you're near my house. Molly will feed you when you're lonely." The first apartment was a small studio on the 3rd floor of a mid-rise building. Aircon, a fridge, a bed, a bathroom. 7,000 baht a month, about 160 pounds. The second was a 1-bedroom older building, 6,500 baht, about 148 pounds. Smaller kitchen, no balcony. The third was in an older two-story building 3 doors down from Derek and Molly. Ground floor, one bedroom, a small kitchen, a real balcony with 2 plastic chairs and a rubber tree in a pot. Water included, Wi-Fi included, 10,500 baht a month, about 240 pounds. Or if I did not eat out much and cooked at home, about $300 all in on rent plus a small electric bill. The landlord was an older Thai man named Kun Somchai, 66, retired school teacher, wore glasses on a chain, spoke slow, careful English. He walked me through the flat and then out onto the balcony and he said, "You are Derek's friend?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Then you are welcome. Derek is a good man. Mally is a good woman. If you're their friend, you're our friend." I stood on that little balcony and I looked at the rubber tree and I said to Derek, this one. Derek said, "You sure?" "It is the most expensive," I said, "Derek. It is $300 a month. In Coventry, that is not the rent, that is the council tax, this one." I paid Kun Somchai 1 month rent, 10,500 baht, and a 2-month deposit of 21,000 baht. Total 31,500 baht, about 720 pounds, out of the Monzo account. He handed me a set of keys and he said, "Uncle Colin, you move in tomorrow if you like." I moved in the next morning. Derek drove my 2 suitcases over in his files. Molly came half an hour later with a small pot of chicken soup and 2 plants for the balcony. She set them next to the rubber tree and pointed at each of them and said, "Water. Every second day. Not more." Then she left. I sat on that balcony that first afternoon and I looked at the 3 plants and the rubber tree and I said out loud to nobody, "Susan, love. I did it. I got here." And the first month was learning the shape of a new life. I want to walk you through what it actually costs me because that is why you're watching this and I promised you the truth. Rent, 10,500 baht, about 240 pounds, or at the exchange rate at the time, about $300. Electric, running a fan mostly and the aircon only at night, about 1,200 baht, about 27 pounds. Water and Wi-Fi included in the rent. Thai SIM with unlimited data, 250 baht, about 6 pounds. Food from the market, mostly fruit and eggs and coffee and some rice. About 1,500 baht for the month, about 34 pounds. Eating out, which was 2 meals a day almost every day at food carts and carinderias and small local places, about 4,000 baht, about 90 pounds. Transport. I did not buy a scooter my first month. Derek advised against it. He said, "Colin, learn the traffic first, take the Songthaos, then decide." A Songthao is a red covered pickup truck that runs like a shared taxi, 30 baht a ride. My monthly transport bill was maybe 800 baht, about 18 pounds. Miscellaneous, haircut, 80 baht. Laundry with Melly's cousin at the corner, 140 baht a week. Coffee at a small shop Derek showed me called Craft 3 or 4 mornings a week at 80 baht each. Total, about 1,800 baht, about 41 pounds. Add it all up, about 20,000 baht a month, about 455 pounds, or in US dollars, about 580. I sat on my balcony at the end of the first month and I looked at the numbers on my Monzo app and I did the calculation again. In Coventry, I had been spending 1,700 pounds a month and drawing down redundancy money to close the gap. In Chiang Mai, I was spending 455 pounds a month and everything was covered. I had £1,245 more per month in Thailand than I had in England. On less income, not more, less. I sat there and I laughed out loud on that balcony like a mad person. Then I got up and I went to Melis for dinner because she had insisted. And I told her the maths, and Derek translated the bits she did not follow. And Melly slapped the table with her hand, and she said, "Uncle Colin, you should have come 10 years ago." I said, "Melly, I did not know I could." She said, "Now you know. I want to tell you about the second month, because that is when things really settled in. I got the visa sorted out with a local agent Derek trusted. Her name was Kun Nan, small office above a coffee shop. She looked at my paperwork and she said, "Uncle Colin, you are almost 64. In 2 years you will get your state pension. That will be around £1,000 a month. That is enough to qualify for a proper retirement extension. For now, we do a non-immigrant O based on savings. You show us 400,000 baht in a Thai bank for 2 months and we sort you out for a year. Then we top it up again next year. Then we switch to income basis when your pension starts." I said, 400,000 baht. That is about £9,000. She said, "Yes." I had £8,300 left after rent and deposit and everything else, because I had been spending less than a quarter of what I had feared. But I needed to keep some for living costs, and I did not want to put every penny into the visa deposit. Kun Nan said, "Uncle Colin, we can do a combination. 200,000 baht in the bank and you show us universal credit or saving statements for the top up. But universal credit stopped when you left, yes?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Then let us wait 1 month. Sell your remaining UK assets. Move what you can. See where you land. There is no rush. Your tourist visa is good until May. You have 3 months of 90-day extensions on top of that. We have time." She did not charge me for the meeting. I walked back to my apartment past a wat where 3 monks were sweeping the courtyard in orange robes, and I sat on the balcony and I opened my Monzo app and I made a plan. I moved my 3 private pensions into a single pot with a UK provider that would let me manage everything online. That took 6 weeks and cost me nothing. I set up an international transfer arrangement with Wise. I sold the last of my UK bits and pieces, mostly the little bit of premium bonds I had forgotten I had, which came to another £1,100. I called Rachel and I told her I was okay. Better than okay. I told her Melly was feeding me twice a week and Derek had introduced me to Kun Somchai, and I had a coffee shop where the owner had learned my order. Rachel started crying on the phone. Not sad crying. The other kind. She said, "Dad, you sound different." I said, "Different how?" She said, "Alive." I said, "I am alive, love, for the first time in years." She said, "Dad, Poppy asks about you every day. She wants to know if you found a tiger." I said, "I have not found a tiger, but there is a lizard on the balcony every morning and I take a picture of him every day and send it to her." She said, "I know." She keeps them in a folder. She calls him Granddad Lizard. I said, "Tell her his real name is Bill." Rachel laughed. She said, "Dad, why Bill?" I said, "Because he looks like a bill." The 3rd month is when Chiang Mai stopped feeling like a place I was visiting and started feeling like a place I lived. I bought the scooter. Derek came with me. It was a Honda Click, 4 years old, 31,000 kilometers on it, 20,000 baht, about 450 pounds. I had not been on 2 wheels since I was 17 and rode a Yamaha FS1E round the estate outside Nottingham. and I want to tell you I was terrified. Derek rode with me for the first 2 weeks. Slow streets, side lanes, teaching me the flow of Thai traffic, which is not chaos once you understand the rhythm, but takes some learning. I got my Thai driving license in week 5. 90 minutes at the office, a color blindness test, a reflex test, 305 baht, about £7. My last UK license renewal had cost me £34 and taken most of a morning at the post office. I made friends. This is the part I want to be careful about because the loneliness had almost broken me in Coventry. And I know a lot of you listening are in the same shape. I did not have to work at making friends in Chiang Mai. I want to say that plain. Friends found me because I was there. Because I said good morning to my neighbors. Because I sat at the same coffee shop and did not hide behind my phone. Because Mali had adopted me and Derek had a wide circle and Kun Somchai had told 2 neighbors I was a good man. And word travels quickly on a small lane in Santitham. Directly next door to me was a Thai widow in her early 60s named Auntie Sunny. She sold banana leaf packets of sticky rice with mango from a little folding table on Saturday mornings. In my 3rd week, she started leaving one at my door on Saturdays with a rubber band around it. I would find them there when I came out. She would not let me pay for them. She said, "Uncle, you buy Sunday. Saturday's gift." I bought the packet every Sunday for a year and a half now. Across the lane was an older Thai man named Uncle Prem, 68, retired taxi driver. He sat in front of his gate most mornings on a small wooden stool with a cup of instant coffee. He waved me over on my 2nd week. He said, "Uncle Colin, you want coffee?" I said yes. He poured me one out of a thermos. We sat there for 20 minutes and he told me about his 3 grandchildren and I told him about Poppy. Neither of us understood more than half of what the other said. It did not matter. That was a full conversation between me and Uncle Prem, and it has become a full conversation between us most mornings. I met a small group of British expats through Derek. They met every Tuesday afternoon at a place called the Duke's Pub in the Old City. 6 of us most weeks. Derek, a man called Nigel from Bristol, 71, former builder. A man called Terry from Sunderland, 68, retired lorry driver. A woman called Beryl from Manchester, 73, retired dinner lady, tough as nails, arrived in Chiang Mai after her husband died in 2016. A younger man called Aid from Liverpool, 59, took early retirement from the Merseyside Fire Service on a medical. We had a rule at that table which Derek had set out the first day I went. No moaning. If you wanted to complain about the traffic or the paperwork or the humidity or the Thai bureaucracy or your girlfriend's family, you could do it once per meeting for no longer than 2 minutes and then you had to stop. Derek said, "Colin, in every expat town there are 2 groups. The ones who make a life and the ones who sit on a bar stool and complain about the country they moved to. Guess which group dies first?" Nigel, who was the funniest of the 6, said, "Colin, if you catch yourself starting a sentence with 'in England we would have,' you have to buy the next round." I laughed. I said, "Nigel, I have not started a sentence like that in 3 months." Nigel said, "Then keep it that way." I went to that pub every Tuesday for a year and a half. It's one of the things that has kept me sane. There is a specific kind of friendship you can only have with other men who have made the same kind of jump you have made. They understand things without you having to explain them. They understand what a Coventry winter feels like on universal credit. They understand why an 8-pound bowl of curry at a food cart makes you laugh out loud on your first month. They understand what it means to send your daughter a picture of a lizard on the balcony every morning. I started tutoring English one afternoon a week, not for money. Beryl put me onto it. She had been doing it for 6 years. There is a small learning center in Santitem that runs a free after school program for kids whose parents cannot afford tuition. They needed a native speaker. I said yes. It has become one of the best hours of my week. I sit with a table of 5 kids, ages 8 to 11, and we read a book together, and I answer their questions about England. One of the boys, a 9-year-old called Creed, asked me last month if it was true that in England people carry umbrellas everywhere. I said yes. He asked why. I said because it rains most of the time. He thought about that for a full minute and then he said, Uncle Colin, that is why you came to Thailand. I laughed. I said, Crit, that is exactly why. I want to tell you about the health thing because it happened. And if you're anything like I was in Coventry, this is the part that terrifies you most about the whole idea. In September of last year, I woke up with a sharp pain in my lower right side. I have never had appendicitis, but I had read enough about it in my life to know what it felt like. I sat up in bed at 4 in the morning and I thought, oh no. I called Derek at 6. He was already up. He picked me up in his Vios 20 minutes later. He drove me to Bangkok Hospital, Chiang Mai. He walked me in through the sliding glass doors of a lobby that looked like a nice hotel, and he stayed with me at the reception desk while a woman in a crisp blue uniform smiled at me and said, Good morning, sir. How may we help? I told her I had abdominal pain. She said, Please sit. A doctor will see you shortly. 14 minutes later, I was in an exam room. A young doctor called Dr. Anong, who had trained in Bangkok and done a fellowship in Sydney, sat with me for 35 minutes. She examined my abdomen, ran an ultrasound herself, ordered blood work, and told me within an hour that it was not appendicitis. It was a kidney stone, small one. Would probably pass on its own in a day or two. She prescribed something for the pain and something to help it move. She told me to drink 2 liters of water a day and come back in 3 days if anything changed. The bill for the visit, the ultrasound, the blood work, the 2 prescriptions, and 45 minutes of a specialist time was 3,200 baht, about 73 pounds, or in dollars, about 85. I want to sit with that number for a second. In Coventry, I would have gone to the A&E at University Hospital. I would have waited 7 hours. I might have been sent home with paracetamol. If I had been sent for an ultrasound, it would have taken 2 weeks to schedule as an outpatient, free at the point of use. But taking 2 weeks. In Chiang Mai, I walked in off the street, was seen in 14 minutes, had an ultrasound in the same visit, and paid 73 pounds. The stone passed the next afternoon. I sat on the balcony with a bottle of water and I texted Rachel a picture of the receipt. Rachel called me 20 minutes later. She said, Dad, this is a joke, right? I said, No, love. That is the actual bill. I paid it at the desk on the way out. She was quiet. Then she said, Dad, Susan would be so angry if she could see this. I said, Angry how, love? She said, Angry at how much you two paid over the years. Angry at the difference. Angry at me being scared for you, when actually you have better health care over there than I do. I said, Rachel, do not be angry. Susan would want us to be glad I have it now. She said, Yeah, I know. Dad, come home for Christmas. I said, I am not coming home for Christmas, love. I cannot afford the flight yet. Give me another 18 months when the state pension kicks in. Then I will come every year. And you will come to me too. Yes. She said, yes, Dad. Yes. Poppy came on the phone. She said, Granddad, did you find a tiger yet? I said, not yet, Poppet. But Bill the Lizard has a friend now, a smaller one. I called him Terry. Poppy said, why Terry? I said, because he looks like a Terry. Poppy laughed so hard on the phone that Rachel had to take it back. I want to tell you about the money because that is what most of you are here for. By the end of my first year, my monthly cost of living had settled at around 18,000 baht, about 400 pounds, or $515. That is rent, electric, water, Wi-Fi, phone, groceries, eating out, transport, health insurance, which I bought with a Thai company called Pacific Cross for about 1,100 pounds a year. Laundry, coffee, the whole lot. My income for that first year was, and this is the honest number, 0. No universal credit, no pension, nothing. I lived entirely off the 8,000 from Rachel and James's mom, plus the 2,000 I had made selling my things, plus the 1,100 from premium bonds. Just over 11,000 pounds total for the whole first year of living in Thailand. That includes the visa fees, the scooter, the deposit on the apartment, the flight, and every meal and every bill for 12 months. 11,000 pounds, 12 months, everything. I still had almost 2,000 pounds left in the Monzo account at the end of year 1. I want you to hear that plainly. A man with 218 pounds to his name in Coventry, 17 months later, was ending the year in Thailand with 2,000 pounds in the bank. Not by getting a job, not by inheriting money, by moving to a country where the numbers work. My private pensions kick in this year, about 400 pounds a month combined. My state pension kicks in 2 years from now, about 950 pounds a month. Once both are running, I will have about 1,350 pounds a month coming in. My monthly cost is 400. That means I will be saving 950 pounds a month for the rest of my life. Some of that goes back to James's mom until the loan is paid. Then it goes into a small savings pot for Poppy. I want to tell you what a normal day looks like for me now, not the highlights, the normal. I woke up this morning at 6:12. The light was already coming through the balcony door. I lay there for a minute listening. A rooster somewhere down the lane. There is always a rooster somewhere in Santitham, and I have made my peace with the roosters. I got up. My back was a bit stiff from the mattress, which is harder than what I was used to in England, but nothing I could not walk off. I put water on for coffee. I stood at the kitchen window and I watched Uncle Prem come out of his gate with his little wooden stool and set it up in the same spot he has set it up every morning for as long as I have known him. He looked over. I raised my hand. He raised his. That was our conversation. I sat on the balcony and I drank my coffee and I watched Bill the Lizard run up the rubber tree. Terry, the smaller one, was not out yet. Terry is a late riser. Poppy is going to be 7 this year and she still has a folder on Rachel's phone with a picture of Bill from every single day. At 7:15, I walked to Auntie Knock's cot. She saw me and pointed at a stool. She said, "Uncle, you late." I said, "Auntie, it is 7:15, same as every day." She said, "Late. Sit." She fed me. Rice soup with pork and ginger and a soft egg. 40 baht. About 90 pence. I gave her 50 and she slid 10 baht back to me with one finger the way she does now. And I put it in my pocket and she nodded. And that was that. I walked back to my apartment. On the way, I passed Uncle Prem on his stool. He waved me over. He said, "Uncle Colin, Auntie Suni, Sunday, chicken, you come?" I said, "I come." He nodded. Full conversation. I got back to my apartment. I read for an hour on the balcony, a book Nigel had lent me at the pub last Tuesday, a biography of Clement Attlee that I had never quite got round to in England. I made another coffee. Around 10, I put my helmet on and rode the scooter to a small clinic in Santitham for a routine blood pressure check. Dr. Anong's practice runs a satellite clinic there. She took my reading 3 times and grinned at me and said, "Uncle Colin, better than mine." She charged me 300 baht for the visit, about £7. I rode back through the mid-morning heat. I stopped at the market for oranges. The lady on the fruit stall pointed at a small bag she had set aside and said, "Uncle, good ones." I paid her 60 baht. I rode home. That is a day. That is the kind of day I have most days now. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that anybody would make a video about. I am a 63-year-old former engineer from Coventry who eats rice soup in the morning and reads on a balcony and has friends in a small neighborhood who look out for him. That is the whole thing. I want to say a few last things before we finish. If you are sitting somewhere in the UK right now watching this in a flat you cannot heat on universal credit with a bank balance that keeps you awake at night, I want you to hear this from somebody who has been exactly where you are. There are options nobody has told you about. Nobody at the job center is going to mention them. Nobody on the news is going to explain them. There is a whole shape of life outside the country you have always lived in that you have never considered because it never occurred to you to consider it. I am not saying Thailand is the answer for everybody. Thailand is my answer. It might be Portugal for you. Portugal is getting harder for Brits since Brexit, but it is still possible. It might be Spain if you sort the paperwork. It might be Malaysia. It might be the Philippines. It might be Ecuador. It might be Vietnam, which is cheaper than Thailand and harder to settle in. It might be a small town in Bulgaria or Romania that nobody's talking about. There are countries where your universal credit standard allowance, if you could still get it, would pay your rent twice over. Nobody teaches this in Britain. Nobody at the job center says, by the way, you're allowed to leave. But you are. At 55 or 60 or 63 or 68, you're allowed to leave. You're allowed to sell what you have and get on a plane and see what the rest of your life could look like somewhere the numbers work. You do not have to do it alone. That is the other thing I want you to hear. I did not do it alone. Rachel and James's mom handed me £8,000. Derek picked me up at the airport. Molly fed me chicken soup on my first night. Kun Samchai rented me a flat because Derek vouched for me. Auntie Nak feeds me every morning and refuses to charge me the right amount. Uncle Prem waves me over for coffee. Nigel and Terry and Beryl and Addie sit with me at the Duke's every Tuesday and remind me not to moan. Dr. Anong watches my blood pressure like she's watching her own father. None of them were in my life 2 years ago. All of them are in it now. That is what happens when you go. I want to mention one thing before I sign off. There is a book called The Honest Move that walks through the real numbers on doing what I did. The cities compared side by side. The visa systems in Thailand and Portugal and the Philippines and Mexico and Malaysia. How the healthcare works in each country. The traps that catch people in their first year abroad. I did not have it. I put it together the hard way. In library booths in Coventry, from strangers on Facebook groups at 3 in the morning, from Derek over pints at the Duke's. If you are seriously thinking about a move like this, it will save you months of stumbling. There is a link in the description if you want to check it out. No pressure. I just wish somebody had put it in my hands when I was sitting in that Coventry flat. If this story meant something to you, if it reached you where you are sitting right now with your council tax bill on the table and your gas bill on top of it, I would appreciate it if you would hit the like button and subscribe. I have more stories coming. Real ones. From real people who thought this country was the only country they were allowed to live in and found out otherwise. My name is Colin. I am 63 years old. I was made redundant at 61, and I could not find another job in a country I had worked in for 45 years. I applied for 472 jobs and got 0 offers. I ran out of money in a Coventry flat with the heating off and a wool hat on my head. My daughter Rachel and a woman I had met 3 times at Christmas handed me £8,000 and told me to get on a plane. I sold my tools and my books and my dining table and I got on that plane. I landed in Thailand with 2 suitcases and a passport that was 3 weeks old. Derek picked me up at the airport with a sign that said Colin from Coventry. Melly fed me chicken soup at her kitchen table. I pay $300 a month for a flat with a balcony and a rubber tree. I have money in the bank. I have friends. I have Sunday dinner across the lane. I have a lizard called Bill who my granddaughter checks on every morning. I have a daughter who tells me I sound alive on the phone. I lost a job. I lost a country that would not have me. I found a life. If you are in the wool hat and the fleece in the cold front room tonight, you are worth the plane ticket. You are worth the 8,000 quid your daughter would give you if you would let her. You are worth the next chapter you cannot see from where you are sitting. Please go and look at it. Thank you for listening. Take care of yourselves. I will see you in the next one.